we decided to study how the amount of sleep affects GPA. We thought this would be interesting because it is a well-known fact that most students don't get enough sleep, and we wanted to know if it affects GPA. When designing our survey, our sample design was a systematic sample, so we picked every 6th sample until we had chosen 7 tables. This data table shows the quantitative data that affects our results to determine whether sleep affects GPA and if the hours spent on activities affect the amount of sleep. These 2 tables represent some qualitative factors within our experiment. The grade level would affect the amount of homework they would be getting because the level of classes taken and offered is different for each grade. This graph represents the type of classes the freshmen we surveyed were taking. However, AP and dual enrollment classes are not offered to freshmen. Pre-AP classes are only offered to freshmen. Pre-AP classes aren't offered to sophomores, while there is one dual enrollment class offered to the sophomore class, but a very small population takes that class, so the odds of us surveying a sophomore in a dual enrollment class was very low. It explains why 0% of sophomores we surveyed took the dual enrollment class. The senior class doesn't get offered pre-AP, but they are offered a large amount of AP and dual enrollment classes. However, a lot of seniors have several electives which we put under academic. That's why the academic bar is so high, because all students have to fill their periods with electives. This data table shows the quantitative data that affects our results to determine whether sleep affects GPA and if the hours spent on activities affect the amount of sleep. In our survey, we asked students if they felt they were getting enough sleep. Most students said they didn't feel like they were getting enough sleep. We attribute that to the amount of activities done and time spent doing homework, which is affected by the level courses students are taking. In this graph, we look to see how the amount of sleep affected the GPA. Our R-squared value is 0.0787. Our value is very far from 1, which means these qualities aren't correlated at all. This graph shows how the amount of hours spent doing an activity affects sleep. The R-squared value is 0.0211. And since it isn't close to 1, that means it isn't closely correlated. The male to female ratio is very lopsided within our experiment. It could have had an effect on our results, but most likely not. The reason it could have been so lopsided was because the tables in the lunchroom tend to have one gender at each table, and it may have so happened that we had tables with just males. The grade levels were so off because when doing the experiment, there were several tables with few kids at them. A lunch is mainly populated with seniors, while the other lunches are more spread out. But since there were more seniors in a lunch, most of them were sitting together and filling whole tables, and other tables were sparsely populated with other grade levels. In our survey, we asked students if they just ignore the homework they have and go to sleep, or they stay up and do their homework. Most of the students said they do their homework before going to bed, but there were several people who said they just ignore their homework and go to bed. However, the R-squared value is 0.0261, which means that the two aren't closely correlated at all because it isn't close to 1.